Hello everyone, it's Jo from blackgold.co.uk. That's black-gold.co.uk and Black Gold Alchemy YouTube channel. I'm bringing you another raw video collection. And today I'm still in the Andes, so you can see the cloud backdrop to the mountains in the background. And this is called a raw video collection because there are no fancy equipment. It's just me, a camera, no microphone, and whatever noises come through in the background. I apologise, but this is why it's raw and unrehearsed and off the cuff. So today I was going to talk about major life transits in astrology, and then I realised that just talking about Saturn alone would take up a fair few minutes, and I don't want these videos to be too long. So I thought we'll make it a mini series, and we'll talk about Saturn today. So apologies for the sounds in the background there. So Saturn takes approximately 29 years to move around our birth chart, or indeed any chart that we're looking at. And often the Saturn return around age 29, sometimes 28, sometimes creeping into age 30, tends to be viewed as a bit of a bit of trepidation there. I'm not sure about this, but actually it's often not as bad as we think it's going to be. And Saturn being a fairly slow-moving planet, obviously takes 29 years to go around, roughly 2.5 years in each of our natal houses. And if you don't know what houses are in the chart, they are backdrops, if you like, to different themes and areas of life. For example, relationships or work, or day-to-day habits and health, or our personality, our ego personality development, or finances, to name a few of them. And so what actually happens before we talk about the Saturn return itself is Saturn is kind of responsible for our ego personality development throughout the first 29 years of our life. And it does this by moving chronologically through the houses in our chart and developing each area. And about the halfway point, around 14, 15 years old, what happens is we get to a point in our development where we realise the world isn't all just about us, and how we interact with the world and how we view the world actually has an effect on us and others. And so at that point, when Saturn starts moving through the final 6 houses and up into the Saturn return, what happens is we begin to not only experience the development in each of the houses, but in its opposite house, the polarity energy. So for example, if at 15 Saturn was going through your first house, which is the self-identity, the ego personality, how we view our place in the world. We're also going to be looking at the opposite house of relationship, the 7th house. And so we'll experience often each energy pitted against the other. So for example, at that age you might be entering your romantic relationship. You might have your first boyfriend or girlfriend, and so as we get sucked into the delights of falling in love and being with somebody and enjoying their company, we get to see how this can also affect our own personal development, because often we get so sucked in that we completely ignore our own needs, and this can happen at all kinds of ages, as we know. So yeah, we get to experience the polarity. So can we keep our own identity separate while still enjoying the delights of a romantic relationship, for example? So the first sort of 14 years we're kind of fairly oblivious. Now, because Saturn doesn't conveniently fall into the first house in our natal chart, for some it will, obviously, Saturn doesn't make its way around the chart in house chronological order from 1 to 12. Typically, for example, mine is in the 2nd house, so I would have started at house 2, moved around to house 12 and then come back finally to house 1. But it is chronological otherwise. And so we go through this, as I said, typically for around about 2.5 years. We experience the lessons and the development of the personality in these different areas of life. And ideally, if we were raised in a very spiritually enlightened and aware family, and we'd had experienced no childhood traumas, big or small, then we would reach the first Saturn return and it would pass by relatively unnoticed. But of course, that's not reality. We all go through some things, even if we're raised in a joyful, happy family environment and have no particularly bad experiences in our 20s, we would still have some experience some traumas, big or small. And so for the following 29 years up until our late 50s, we get a second chance. So again, Saturn will make its way around the chart, around all the houses, until it returns to the same point it was when you were born. And so we get a second chance, as it were. And if we learn the lessons a bit better the second time round and do some of our healing work, then by the time we reach our second Saturn return, it's not really that noticeable. We also get a third chance, of course, up until age 84, if we've still got some work to do on certain areas. And interestingly, the third Saturn return at age 84 coincides with the first Uranus return that we experience, but we won't cover Uranus today. We'll do that in another video. So yeah, and when Saturn does come to its return point, it's not a case of it just lasting a few weeks. Typically, for most people, it will have 3 phases. This is because it moves fairly slowly. It comes into contact with itself in your chart, and then typically it will go into retrograde. So it comes back over that point again for a second time, and then when it turns direct, it will move again for a third time over your natal Saturn point. So typically a Saturn return is experienced in 3 phases of a few weeks each, rather than one sort of longer period that lasts for a few months. So we do get a breather from it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a difficult period when we get our Saturn return. And it's a maturity point, a maturation point that we're experiencing. We're now being asked, after completing one Saturn cycle, to, well, I suppose, grow up, basically, to put behind the exuberance of youth and start focusing on who we are, where we're going. This is typically a time that people would decide to get more serious in their relationships, perhaps get married, start a family, really focus on the career and generating income, and building a life for themselves in the typical normal world. So yes, definitely a maturation point, as is also turning 30. So that gives you a bit of an insight into Saturn today. I'll wrap this up now because I want these videos to drag on more than 10 minutes. But we'll come back to major life transits, because the 40s in particular is relatively packed with some pretty big transits. So we'll talk about some of those, maybe all of them actually, in the next video perhaps. But that just gives you a little bit of insight into Saturn. I do major life transit readings actually, which can be very interesting, particularly if you're in your 30s and approaching your 40s, where you've got quite a lot of these major transits coming up. So being forewarned is being forearmed and knowing what to expect. So yeah, we'll cover some of those in another video. So I'm wishing you all a happy, what's the day? Thursday, and I hope the sun is shining where you are. It's trying to break through here and getting a bit warmer. And sending you so much love and light and happiness. And yeah, please do check out my website if you feel to, black-gold.co.uk, because I have blogs on astrology there, and also under the Major Astrology tab you can see some of the readings I do, including the Major Life Transits one. But I'm not limited to just the ones listed, and actually the page does need a little bit of updating in terms of how many pages you get in each reading, because they seem to be ever growing. So anyway, yeah, check that out if you feel to, and thank you for watching this video. Sending you lots of love.